Hi, everybody. Welcome to class this Saturday morning, September 18th. Pretty fall day we have here in Blue Mounds. Really nice, bright and sunny, which is great for going outdoors, but hopefully you're spending this time with us before you go outdoors. And then you can go out and start your day all integrated and full of breath. Um, Pelvic floor. We've been working on the pelvic floor. So today in the series, we're going to talk a little bit about the relationship between the neck and the pelvic floor. And neck tension and pelvic floor tension often go together and also often have a real deep postural relationship. Um, so, on a really simple level, one way to think about it is if I get all the aspects of my torso balanced on top of each other, then that is the simplest way for me to maintain posture, right? And you might think about that as blocks. So if my pelvis was one block, my lower back was another block, my rib cage, my neck, my head, and all those blocks, if they're stacked perfectly aligned, then there's no effort, right? You take your hands away, you're good. But if you take a couple blocks and move them forward or back, then suddenly I actually have to hold all those blocks together, right? They're going to fall over, they're going to tip over if I'm not like standing there holding them together, right? And that's a little bit what happens with our torso and our posture sometimes. There's a way the pelvis and the rib cage and the head can all line up. And when they do that, the neck and the lower back have a little bit of curve in them to kind of organize in line as well. When that happens, it takes the least amount of effort in our postural muscles. They work because we always have to work against gravity, but it's not a lot of effort. And there's a way the front, back, and side postural muscles alternate a little bit, not one muscle group working the whole time. And as you inhale and exhale, there's little alterations in those postural muscles. So that's great for an organic body. We like that. A little bit of movability and efficiency that way. But if the head comes a little forward or the pelvis goes a little back or any of those things, then we get a lot of chronic tension in one set of postural muscles, maybe the back postural muscles in the neck, or maybe the pelvic floor muscles in the pelvis, or up into kind of the back of the throat, even, or the jaw, like this sort of grinding teeth feeling. All the way through, we could see that. So that's the main way, I would say, or the sort of most general way to talk about how pelvic floor and neck tension are related. That whether my pelvis is a little tipped under, which would be the pelvic floor kind of tightening and grabbing, that's going to affect my neck and my posture, my tension in my neck. Or if my pelvic floor is tilted the other way, if my pelvis is tilted the other way, maybe the pelvic floor is tight in a different way, open in a different way, that's got a different like feeling in my neck and my back and how that's going to align. Now I'm showing big, broad, exaggerated postures. For some of us, we have that kind of exaggerated posture. But even if you have just a little difference in there, those tension patterns can be related, right? If we take that stack of blocks and we take the top one and we just take it like half an inch over, it's still unlikely to really hold up, right? Like every little bit you get off, there's a little bit of tension that shows up. So that's one way to think about it. And then we're just going to kind of observe in our bodies as best we can how, if we can feel that, those relationships, and just kind of check in back and forth between the neck and the pelvis. Or at least that's what I'm going to do. We'll see what Scott does and how he approaches it. So let's start with some of the pelvic floor work we've done to kind of warm up, and then we'll move from there. So standing with your feet a little bit open, turned out, comfortably wide. We've talked a fair amount of sits bones, spread apart, and then come together. That's our way to release the pelvic floor as they spread apart, and then a little bit of like healthy engagement as they come together. So find your sits bones very indelicately, lean forward, put your fingers on those bones, And then take a little bend in your knees. And as you bend your knees, think of those bones spreading apart. And then as you straighten your legs, think of those bones coming together. And bending your knees, the sits bones get wider. And straightening your legs, the sits bones get narrower. Now, you don't have to have your fingers there. Sometimes it's nice to feel that bone just to give you a sense of like where to put your internal attention. It's fine once you feel like I'm just going to visualize that sits bones apart, sits bones together. Don't over effort it. Imagine the bones spreading. Imagine them coming together. If you feel like you're getting more tense in your hips, back off. Don't try too hard. Just visualize it. Maybe you start to feel the bones moving. Maybe it's an image. Great either way. Spreading apart, coming together. And one more time, spreading apart, holding it down here. And we'll take this exercise. I'm stealing Scott's material right now. So floating your left heel up and then slowly lower it down. And then floating the right heel up. Now, do you feel as your heel lifts, imagine your sits bone getting even a little wider. And then slowly lowering the heel down. And you might think that that sits bone just dangles down a little heavier too. Left heel comes up, a little wider with that left sits bone, and then it just dangles down as you slowly lower. And then right heel up. I may have messed up my right and left, but you know what you need to do. And then coming back up to standing. I'm going to take that whole thing again. So a little down and up, sits bones wide apart, and then come together. And sits bones apart and together. Now maybe you think of the tailbone a little bit too, just kind of dangling, freely moving back there. Sometimes I think about the dinosaur tail. It's heavy, but it's also like floating back. And the T-Rex. And one more time down and stay there. And we'll take this little movement. Heel goes up, nice wide open sits bone, and then tail dangles, sits bones dangle, slowly lowering down. Other heel up, lower. Don't go as high this time with your heel, just a little bit up. Sometimes that's better. And then coming up to standing. And walk your feet together. Okay. Come to the top of your mat. And then let's take just a little bit of movement with the knees going forward, the knees parallel and reaching forward. So my feet are like hip distance apart, maybe a tiny bit wider than hip distance, and toes pointing forward. I'm going to let my pelvis tip a little forward. I'm going to think sits bones really wide, knees forward. And then almost like hands on my knees here, I'm just going to almost cat-cow, like send your tail back even a little bit more. So now you could think more like a cat or a dog. When their tails go way back and up, it's a little bit you're feeling here. And at the same time you do that, let the sits bones feel like they're getting a little wider. And then opposite, let the tail curl underneath, the sits bones kind of come together underneath, round your spine, roll up to standing. So take that a couple times. Hinge a little forward, bend your knees, pointing straight forward. Hands on your knees, you can push into your hands a little bit for support. And then like the cat-cow, cat, dog, puppy, kitten, maybe is even better, like a little kitten tail straight up and back. Sits bones really wide. And then tuck your tail, sits bones together. Let it come underneath you, round your spine. And all the way back up. One more time. forward. Press the hands. Now you could do this from your back, you could do this from your lower back, but do it from your sits bones. Wider, tail, a little more up. And imagine your lower back follows, it doesn't lead. And then tailbone, sits bones, drawing in towards each other to round your spine. This time, instead of rolling up to standing, let's roll down to the floor. And take a little stretch here. However straight or bent you want your knees, it's just fine. Now, in this position here, let's check in with the neck. How does it feel to let your head dangle? And imagine a relationship between your tailbone that goes from your tail to your sacrum, through your lower back, through the rib cage part of the spine, into the neck and the head. One long fluid line. You imagine the head is just gently releasing out of the tailbone. Couple breaths. Again, knees can be bent with the same image. And then placing your hands on the floor. Let's come back to hands and knees. And then we'll flip around, lying on your back. Knees bent, feet flat. And then here, how do things feel in your pelvis, right? So one nice thing about the pelvic floor, when it starts to get a little bit of motion, a little bit of action, then lots of subtle changes. Maybe your hips just feel like my hip flexors right now, they feel like a little warm and a little released. It's nice. My lower back, kind of the same way. It's like, oh, I kind of did something, but it also feels like really relaxed at the same time. It feels kind of easy to send my breath down into my pelvis right now. And also, I'm just like more aware of the area of my pelvic floor, right? Between my sits bones, between my tailbone and my pubic bone. So we're going to take a moment with any of those observations, whatever you notice, lying here with your breath. And if you don't have any sort of pithy observation, that's okay too. Just imagine your pelvis is heavy on the floor and your breath moves down towards your hips and you just let things relax. Now we're going to start just a little bit of movement up in the head and neck. So the same nuance and subtlety you've been working with on the pelvic floor, we're going to apply that to the neck, not like big neck stretches. So we're going to think of nodding your head a tiny bit on the floor. So I'm going to drop my chin in just a little more towards my collarbones. And then I'm going to come back to looking straight up to the ceiling. Exhale as you let your chin soften down a little bit, like you're nodding your head, and then looking to the ceiling. Now, as you make this action, could you relax in the back of your throat? Like the place where you swallow? Could you imagine that relaxing? Could you relax behind your eyes and in your jaw? And then could you get a little more relaxed around your shoulders? Now with that same sort of attention, imagine you had a little pencil on the tip of your nose and you were going to draw a tiny little circle in the air, like towards the ceiling with your nose. So you're going to make a little circle with your head. So you're going to imagine your nose is drawing that circle. And the same sort of attention we just had with the nodding, your throat relaxed, your shoulders relaxed, behind your eyes relaxed. Tiny, tiny movement. And then draw your circle the other direction. And then relax everything on the floor. Now, maybe you notice a little bit of a difference down in your pelvis and your sits bones and your pelvic floor. I do, but also like maybe you don't. It's just totally fine because it's pretty subtle. But you might be surprised. Like take a moment. How does your head and your neck feel? How does that feel? Do you notice a difference there? And then just ask the question, do you notice a difference down in your pelvis? Now we're going to take it into some knee folds. Right knee floats in, and exhale, lower it down. Left knee floats in, and lower it down. And then just open to those same questions. Can you relax your throat as you do the knee folds? Your shoulders? Or do you notice the opposite? Do you notice some tension? And then like, oh, okay, once you notice it, it'll often start to work towards letting go, alternating back and forth. Easy, deep neck muscles, easy pelvic floor. And then I'll give you a hint. Probably the place you notice anything coming on would be that first inch off the floor. When the first foot takes that first inch off the floor, it's most likely when things will tense up. They often get a little less tense as the knee gets higher. And then that last inch before you touch the floor, it's the same inch. But as you get lower and lower, things will tighten up, right? So that's a good place to pay attention and observe. See if you can find a little more fluid ease. Last set. And then after you finish the set, take a moment, breathe, and notice the rest of your torso, your chest, your lower back, all the spaces in between. Okay, let's take your hands behind your head, elbows up towards the ceiling. Now, relax your neck, feel how your head's heavy. Relax your pelvis, feel how your sits bones can release. Exhale, let's get a little abdominal work coming on. So a little bit of that rib connection, low abdominal connection. Using that feeling to bring your head up. A little ways, like halfway up and pause. Take a breath in and then check in with the neck and the pelvic floor. And then on the next exhale, maybe a little higher, or if you feel like it's not great to go higher, hold it in place with the next exhale. Lower back down, relax the neck. Take another breath. Inhale, exhale, little abdominal tone. Floating the head about halfway up and pause. Easy neck, easy sits bones, just working the abdominals. Maybe a little higher on the next breath, maybe not. Lower back down. Let's try it 2 more times. Last time. And then relax. So take a moment and come into a position where you can look at your screen easily, whatever that position is for you. And I'll do a little bit of a demonstration. So we've kind of already gone into this in the past weeks, that we've talked about bringing the head up. Sometimes brings the pelvis up for people, that the way they get their head up is they lift their tailbone. And that's an sort of like exact analogy to what I was talking about at the beginning of class, that as the head starts to move, it'll kind of pull the pelvis forward, right? Like those 2 blocks are moving together, right? It's like your lower back is pushing down, your pelvis is coming up, your head's coming forward. Those things are often stuck together. Now, it's not a terrible connection. It's not a bad position to be in. But are you doing that consciously or unconsciously, right? Is it just like a stuck habit, or is it something you're like actively thinking about, right? So the way we test that is, can you do the other, which is to leave the pelvis where it is, to let the sits bones stay relaxed, and then to bring the head up. Now I imagine for a lot of people, this halfway up, you feel right away your neck is pulling forward, your neck is grabbing. It's really challenging. So you try to relax it a little bit. And then maybe you feel the pelvic floor is grabbing, right? Pulling you up. You try to relax that a little bit. Then abdominals come on to bring you up. And I imagine for a lot of people, as soon as you turn your abdominals on, it's also like the other stuff comes on. All of this is really normal, right? So this is what we're playing with. It doesn't have to be perfect. It might just be like, yeah, I'm still grabbing, but I'm going to try to relax my neck by 5%, right? I'm just going to use my neck a little less, or I'm going to let my sits bones release just a little bit. But if I try to make them perfect and relax them all the way, I can't get my abdominals and my neck grabs a lot, right? So let's work in the relative space of how much can you release the sits bones, work the abdominals, and relax the neck. So let's do a couple more. Come back on your back. I'm playing with that. All those pauses, you just get to check in with all that stuff. And one more time. All the way down. And then take both legs out and just relax everything. Okay, so we're going to keep the right leg straight. Left leg comes in, grab the back of your thigh. And then kind of test out your awareness in those different places again. And then same thing as you stretch the leg up. Leg reaches up, easy neck. Bend your knee. Inhale. Float the leg up, easy shoulders. Bend your knee. Floating the leg up without pulling your sits bone up, without pulling your pelvis up. Just leaving all that in place. Next time your leg's up, leave it there. Now we'll add some tone to the belly. Feel some abdominal work. Let's flex your right foot on the floor. Hands come away and by your side. I'm practicing single leg circles with all this information. Inhale over to the right, exhale around and up. And I think it's on lifting the leg that you're most likely to feel the neck grab, the sits bone pull up. So notice that phase of the movement. As the leg comes up, can you use your abdominals instead of tightening your neck? Can you use your abdominals instead of lifting your pelvis up? Let's try the reverse. Three more. Drop your left leg down. Bring the right leg in. And then same thing on the right. Leg floats up. Relax your throat. Bend your knee. Leg floats up without pulling your sits bone up. Leave your leg up next time you're there. Find a little tone in your belly. Take your hands by your side. And testing it with the leg circle. Inhale. Exhale. Relax behind your eyes. Three more. Same thing in reverse. Reaching open. Three more of these. And relax your right leg down. And then do another moment. How does your pelvis feel? How does your lower back feel? How do your hips feel? Your jaw, all that stuff. Just take a moment and notice it. And then however you like, find a way up to sitting. And we'll get ready for Scott.
Hey, everybody. So let's build upon some of that work. And so we have that dynamic connection, pelvic floor, neck. And then as you were exploring in the sumo position, it also includes the feet. So let's begin with feet comfortably hip width apart. Let your arms hang. And imagine your tailbone was hanging out of your skull. So I think it was last week or the week before I used the image like a plumb bob. And so the weight effortlessly hangs from the string. And imagine the tailbone connected to your skull, tailbone hanging out of your skull. So with that sense of the tailbone effortlessly releasing out of your skull, now invite awareness to your feet. And the movements I'm going to demonstrate here are pretty small movements. So start with your left foot and lift your left heel up a little bit, a couple inches. Do you feel how your forefoot anchors into the floor? Now spread your toes out, but not that much work. Just a little effort to spread your toes out. And then keeping that sense that your toes are contacting the floor, they're spreading, the ball of your foot is broadening. And then slowly release that left heel down. A sense that your foot is broadening into the floor. Now let's work with the other side. Lift your heel up. Notice how that shifts weight into the forefoot. Let that weight in the forefoot spread. Long toes, spreading toes, ball of your foot, releasing into breadth. And like your tailbone hangs out of your skull, let that heel slowly release out of your skull. And I love that word, dangle downward. So dangly tailbone, dangly heels. And here's a little trick to help engage in a healthy way the pelvic floor and release neck tension. Is ever so slightly shift the weight from your heels to the balls of your feet. So for the quantifiers or the quants among us, maybe 55% of the body weight in the front of your foot, 45% of the weight in your heels. All right, quants, you know who you are. Now let's bring that same weight distribution as you step your feet apart. Same weight distribution as you turn both legs out. And with the weight just slightly toward the forefoot. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. Now let's go up and down like this a few times. So sumo. Sumo part 2. And with the weight just ever so slightly skewed toward your forefoot. Let that broaden your forefoot. Toes effortlessly move apart away from each other. And a sense that your toes are long, they're lengthening. The next time in that triple flex position, ankles bend, hips bend, knees bend. And let's pause here for a moment. So you've done a bit exploring the connection of tailbone, pelvic floor to neck. And then we're building upon that, how that connects into your feet. So keeping that sense that your toes are lengthening, ball of your foot is broadening. Press down to come up. And then step your feet back together. And now let's make our way to the floor using a Yoga Sun Salutation. So inhale, fill your back. Exhale, take your front ribs down as you take your arms up. That helps open up your chest. And then inhale, fold. Here's a chance to mobilize your spine. Exhale, spine the other direction, extension. And then inhale, step back, head down dog. We'll take a few breaths here. So let your gaze effortlessly fall upon your feet. And then come on down to your knees. And just like Collette asked you a little bit earlier to be in position to take a look at your screen, same thing here. So I trust the terms are pretty straightforward, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So the ball of the foot is going to be the roots of the toes, and a sense that the ball of your foot, the bases of your toes broaden. And then the toes, very often when we think of lengthening the toes, they spontaneously lift up off the floor. So we want to work on keeping the toes releasing into the floor. So let's use downward facing dog as a way to work with those two images. So from hands and knees, make your way into head down dog. Let your gaze fall upon your feet, and specifically your left foot. So as you look at your left foot, let the ball of your foot broaden. Let those left toes, all 5 of them, release into the floor. And imagine your toes were stretching forward in front of you. As you now take your left heel and stretch it back behind you, like you're going to elongate your foot. So now let's maintain that dynamic in the left foot. Now shift your awareness to your right foot. Broaden the ball of your foot. Keep the contact of your toes upon the floor as you stretch your toes forward toward your hands. And then reach that right heel back behind you, like you're going to increase the length of your feet. Now that dynamic in the feet, maybe you've already felt how that helps release tension that accumulates around the tailbone. Couple more breaths here. And then with the exhale, step your feet forward, gorilla. Inhale, fold. Let's pause here for a bit. Let your head dangle out of your tail. Let the 2 feet, your forefoot broaden. And then press the front of your foot down into the floor to initiate the spine articulation to come up. Of course, heels stay down. But most of the work coming from your feet and letting your spine receive the support. Arms down. Returning to standing. Broaden the forefoot, left foot, right foot. Lengthen your toes, left foot, right foot. Then the weight a little bit skewed toward the front of the foot, heel ever so slightly lightened. And then imagine those heels we're going to draw away from your toes into the space behind you. I don't know about you, but I feel my lower belly muscles naturally engage when I activate my feet in this way. So let your lower belly support the lift of your head. Support the release of your neck. Then let your tailbone dangle out of your skull. So you're using your feet to hook into your belly, to provide the support for your spine, including neck and head. Independent of that oh so common, all too common, tensing of the tailbone that relates to tensing the neck. So let's put this into practice. So in a moment, we're going to take left foot, step it back. This time may be mirror image of you all. Take your left foot, step it back a little bit. And for the time being, keep that heel lifted. Keep the back knee straight. Exhale, bend the front knee. Inhale, straighten your front knee. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. A few more like this. Let that back foot, let the forefoot naturally broaden into the mat. The next time that front knee in the bent position, pause there. And now that front foot, let's keep the heel on the floor, but ever so slightly skew the weight from heel to front of the foot. And you know what to do with the toes and the ball of the foot. Then maintaining that connection to both feet, bring both arms forward. With the next exhale, lift up. Few breaths here. And release your arms down. And back to standing. Let your feet spread out on the floor. Any of you remember the Muppet Show way back in the day? Remember the character Beaker? I think Beaker had an undiagnosed anxiety disorder. And he was very narrow, wasn't he, Beaker? So let your feet spread out. And many people report when they let their feet spread out, they experience sort of an ease. It's sort of global, not just in the body, but also quite often in the mind. So now let's take your other foot, your right foot, step it back a bit. And we're going to keep that heel lifted. Heel lifted organically, we'll put all the weight on the forefoot. And then keeping the forefoot broad, exhale, bend your front knee. Inhale, straighten. So the 2 feet are doing similar things, though different. Back heel is lifted, stays lifted. Front heel is down, stays down. But both front and back foot, we have a sense of the forefoot broadening and the toes lengthening. The next time, front knee in the bent position, pause there. Continue this dynamic work with your feet as you bring both arms forward. Exhale, both arms up. And exhale down. And stepping back into standing. So lengthen your feet, heels back, toes forward. Weight slightly toward your forefoot to help appropriately engage your belly muscles. Let that support from the belly. That's what lifts your head and neck. Then from the lift of your head, let your tail dangle. Dangly tails, whether dinosaur, cat, or iguana. Your choice. Big deep inhale. Exhale up. Inhale, fold. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, back to head down dog. And that's been a lot of talk, a lot of ideas. Let's hold here for 5 slow, deep breaths and working on in your own body whatever you find most engaging. And then come on down to your knees, and then all the way onto your back. So on your back, knees bent, feet flat upon the floor. We're full circle, things you've worked with already. We've talked a bit about the relationship of tailbone as an expression of your pelvic floor, the tension in the neck. So now a connection that I find quite engaging is to explore the tailbone or the pelvic floor's connection to the palate. So your choice, eyes could be open or they could be closed. And invite awareness to the roof of your mouth. And this will be probably familiar for many of you and probably very unfamiliar, maybe even kind of strange for others. So whether familiar or new, comfortable or kind of odd, invite the roof of your mouth to relax. Now, of course, that may seem impossible, the roof of the mouth. Wait a minute, isn't that bone? How can I relax a bony structure? Give it a shot. Explore the power of imagination, the power of your mind, the power of visualization to relax held tension by relaxing the roof of your mouth. And I often consider the roof of the mouth one end of the spine, and literally tailbone is the other end of the spine. So now relax both ends of your spine, tailbone and palate. Now nothing works for everybody. That being said, a reliable connection is relaxing the palate and its power to release held tension in the neck. So now if you've closed your eyes, open your eyes. And let's bring these ideas up into sitting. And let's start off with knees bent, feet flat upon the floor and sitting. So we've talked a bit about rooting down, in this case it's your sitting bones, to support lifting up through the crown of your head. Then let your tailbone dangle out of your skull. So that's releasing one end of your spine. Now to the other end of your spine, relax your palate. And if you feel like your facial expression, maybe you look kind of sleepy, or maybe not your most intelligent, that's it. Because many of us hold a lot of tension in our skull to make our face look a certain way. Right? All right, so now let's do some spinal twists and see if you can maintain the ease on both the ends of your spine. Take your left foot forward. Bring left arm across, catch your knee, other hand behind. Let your tail dangle out of your skull. Invite the roof of your mouth to relax into broadening. Couple breaths here. Back into the middle and back to the reset position. Now, naturally, I think I'm a pretty smiley person. But when I work on relaxing my palate, what I'll sometimes find is that my face will feel kind of frowny, maybe because I'm used to having a certain smile on my face. So whatever it feels like to relax your palate, let's go ahead and explore, because that can be such a powerful technique to relax neck tension. So now let's take the other foot, your right foot forward. Right arm reaches across. The two ends of your spine, lowest part of the spine, tailbone, uppermost part of your spine, palate. Explore what it feels to release both of them. And then turn back toward the middle, back to the reset position. And then now, both legs outstretched in front of you. So putting some of these pieces together, we've talked a bit about forward bends as related to releasing held tension in the pelvic floor. And then we're building upon that, the relationship of releasing the pelvic floor to releasing the neck. So let's carry that into a front bend. Hands maybe come to your knees, maybe your shins, maybe your feet out there. So let your sitting bones relax apart. Invite the crown of your head toward your feet so you end up looking down. And now as you relax your tailbone, relax the roof of your mouth. And breathe. And then come on up. And then relax on your back. Personally, I like to keep my knees bent, feet on the floor, and I'll take my feet a little bit apart so I can lean my knees into each other. That works in my body. Some people prefer to stretch their legs out. Maybe you have something else you prefer. And then once you find a comfortable position, feel free to close your eyes if you'd like. So maybe in a forthcoming week, we can explore the nuances of the palate. There's a hard palate that's toward the front of your mouth, where your teeth are. And then if you go farther back and deeper in, there's the soft palate, which is definitely muscular. And if you continue moving farther back and deeper in, you actually emerge at the back of your skull. Explore the possibility of releasing all the elements of your palate, in addition to the front of your palate. And let that include your tailbone. Now, as we take a few more breaths here, maybe you've heard of cranial sacral therapy, or maybe you've received cranial sacral therapy. And what we're doing is related to that. If you closed your eyes, now open your eyes. And then as you feel ready, come on up to sitting. All right. So pelvic floor connected to neck. Before we close for the day, any comments, questions in the chat? Looks kind of quiet out there. So thanks so much for joining us. And a quick announcement, Collette is performing this afternoon at this really wonderful event just south of Madison at a farm out in Verona. And if you're local here, maybe I'll see you there. And Collette has put into the chat the URL for that event. So please, if you get a chance, tell your friends, neighbors, relatives, or coworkers, associates, whomever about what we do here. And if you're local, maybe I'll see you at the performance. Bye-bye.